Master handed each of us, Junior and me, an egg. Junior snatched away the phoenix egg, leaving me with the Serpentia egg. Unfortunately, Junior failed to care for the phoenix egg properly, and it seemed to perish under his watch. Meanwhile, my egg was on the verge of hatching into a Serpentia, but just before the egg could hatch, Junior switched it with the phoenix egg without my knowledge. What he didn't know, however, was that the phoenix egg hadn't truly died. It was undergoing rebirth. Moreover, the Serpentia egg, having absorbed my heart's blood, would only recognize me as its master. Now both the phoenix and Serpentia, fully reborn, stood beside me, addressing me as their master. Junior, having opened his celestial eye, identified Master's left-hand egg as the phoenix egg. Not that the celestial eye was necessary, the phoenix egg and the Serpentia egg were distinctly different in size. Still, Junior, wary of any illusions I might cast, forced his celestial eye open. Feigning difficulty, he asked, "Elder brother, which one should I choose?" His large eyes darted slyly before he added, "I've heard that the Phoenix clan's maidens are naturally born from their own eggs. Elder brother, you follow the path of detachment. Won't that harm your cultivation?" I clasped my hands behind my back and replied calmly, "Junior brother, the path of detachment is not the path of heartlessness. Also, isn't it time you returned my celestial eye to me?" Junior cowered behind Master, his voice trembling as he said, "Elder brother, my skills are lacking. I can't discern demons and spirits without the celestial eye. Besides, the celestial eye belongs to the Order. Didn't Master say that everything in the Order is shared?" I smirked. "Junior, do you remember how I retrieved the celestial eye and these divine eggs from the abyss at the cost of all my spiritual energy? I collapsed at the gates of the Order upon returning, only to find the eye and the eggs claimed as Order property when I awoke. Back then, Master spoke with such pride, calling me the pride of the Order, as he placed the eye and eggs into the treasure vault. But when I was gravely injured, my spiritual veins severed and my immortal bones shattered, all I got was a simple, 'You're the senior brother of the Order. This is what you should do.' The celestial eye isn't just a sacred tool for seeing through spirits, it also has miraculous healing properties. Yet, Master refused to let me use it. I was left with permanent injuries and could no longer wield a sword. After soaking in the frost pool for 3 years, barely regaining some strength, I was summoned to the main hall to choose between 2 divine eggs. Why doesn't the Order have anyone capable of hatching them? From the moment I entered the hall, the eggs were restless. Master must have noticed as he suppressed them with spiritual energy before saying, "Choose." I remained still and asked, "Master, if the eggs hatch successfully, who will they belong to?" Master's expression didn't change as he declared, "Naturally, they belong to the Order." Crossing my arms, I retorted, "Then I won't hatch them." Master's face darkened but quickly returned to calm. He asked, "And what does Adrian think should be done?" I replied casually, "Whoever hatches them should own them." The eggs charged with spiritual energy had clearly been incubated by the elders but without success. If they had succeeded, the eggs would have already formed spiritual bonds. Such fortune would never have come to me. Since returning from the abyss, I felt a faint connection to the eggs. Master and the others must have noticed too. Involving Junior brother was merely because of his pure spiritual body, his unparalleled beauty that captivates all who pursue immortality. Such a physique is ideal for dual cultivation. Junior said, "Elder brother, it was Master who took us in. This Order is our home, it shouldn't be divided." Though his cultivation had stagnated, his rhetoric had improved. I replied flatly, "The timber for the Order's gates, I carried it from Mount Olympus. The talismans used by the Order, I was the one who invented them. The stone steps leading up the mountain, I carved them, step by step, with a hammer. Master, is your divine sword still serving you well?" The sacred sword at Master's side trembled slightly. "That sword," I continued, "I pulled it from the jaws of an ancient dragon. Back then, Master said I couldn't wield it and took it to safekeep for me. Anyone else who had accomplished these things would have been made an elder long ago, but not me. Master said I was still young and needed more training. Now my spiritual veins are severed, and my body is no different from a mortal's. Master's face hardened. The order belongs to everyone. How dare you divide it so clearly? What, Adrian, have you grown wings and wish to establish your own faction? Disciple would never, I said, kneeling at once. I knew that if I were expelled from the order, the enemies I had made on its behalf would hunt me down and kill me. Adrian, Master sighed, I know your current condition frustrates you. 20 years ago, I saved you from the edge of a cliff. 3 years ago, it was the order that rescued you when you collapsed at the mountain's edge. I am not using this to demand gratitude, but cultivators should not be so fixated on gains and losses. It is out of concern for you that I asked you to incubate these sacred eggs. If one recognizes you as its master, that would be ideal. But if, before he could finish, I interrupted, let Junior brother choose first, Junior grinned. In that case, I'll pick the one in Master's left hand. Thank you, Master. I weighed the Serpentia egg in my hands and sighed. It seemed as ordinary as I was, a mere egg, just as I was a mere blade of grass. Despite knowing I had no spiritual roots, Master took me in as a disciple. Bringing the Serpentia egg back to the frost pool, I submerged it in the icy waters alongside me. The order's injured were always treated with divine herbs and flowers, but never me. The frost pool's healing effects were minimal, and few ever visited. The Serpentia egg remained lifeless in the pool. Before I left the main hall, Master had stopped me. He reminded me that with my severed veins and broken cultivation, my immortal path was all but over. If I failed to hatch the sacred egg, the elders had agreed to allow me to return to my homeland, sparing me from wasting my years at the order. The implication was clear. The sage of Mount Crystalwood had no intention of protecting me. The serpent egg floated gently in the water, circling closer to me. Slowly, I removed my robe and took out a small bowl. I was originally just a blade of grass at the foot of Mount Crystalwood. My master discovered me during his travels and brought me back. Through his efforts, I transformed into human form, my body imbued with the essence of the sun and moon, brimming with spiritual energy. Only Master knew my origins, and I suspected he was also aware that I was now completely devoid of that energy. All I had left was this naturally formed, resilient body. As the small blade scratched across my chest, the pain was excruciating, as if a wild beast had thrust its claws into my chest and shredded my heart into countless pieces. Gasping for air, I collected half a bowl of blood, trembling as I placed it by the shore. The serpent egg seemed to sense the offering and swam to the bowl, crawling inside. I dropped the blade and slumped against the shore, panting heavily as I watched the serpent egg absorb every last drop of blood. Fighting to keep my eyes open, I couldn't help but think, was this bloodthirsty creature a sacred relic or a demonic entity? After tending to my wound, I tucked the serpent egg away and headed to the dining hall of the sect. Before I even reached the entrance, I overheard the Azure disciples speaking animatedly inside. I heard that Elder has become immortal now, one of them exclaimed. Really? The chubby one next to him chimed in. For someone as arrogant as him, that must be unbearable. Their tone was far from concerned. It was laced with schadenfreude, as if they were eagerly awaiting a spectacle. It's true, the first disciple replied. Junior told me himself. Elder has lost all his spiritual energy. The Azure disciple slapped the chubby one's shoulder and added, Didn't you notice how often he's been coming to the dining hall since leaving seclusion? The chubby one sneered. I can't stand self-righteous people like him. Let's see how he plans to compete with Junior now. Junior's so impressive, I heard he's destined to marry Phoenix. Suddenly, I felt the serpent egg shift slightly against my chest. I stepped into the dining hall, and the room instantly fell silent. I grabbed a meal box and left without a word. I hadn't gone far when the Azure disciple's voice rang out again. He still thinks he's some sort of holy prodigy. Without his divine aura, he reeks worse than any demon I've ever met. Keep your voice down, the chubby one whispered. He's not far off. But the Azure disciple deliberately raised his voice. I wanted him to hear me. I recognized that Azure disciple. His name was Harrison. 3 years ago, during a mission to the Abyss, he had asked to accompany me, hoping to elevate his status within the sect. I had refused. The serpent egg and I had become inseparable, eating and sleeping together. It often floated around me, circling playfully before settling on my chest to rest. But every half-month, it needed blood to sustain itself. I had heard that Junior and the Phoenix egg were an ideal pair. With his unparalleled beauty, Junior had gathered numerous rare herbs and flowers within the sect to prepare baths for the Phoenix egg. The egg was gradually awakening, radiating layers of golden light. In contrast, my serpent egg showed no signs of change, still hovering listlessly around me. Frustrated, I pressed it down and bared my teeth in mock anger. If you don't behave, I'll cook and eat you. Startled, the serpent egg pretended to sleep, nestling against my chest. One morning, I awoke to find my surroundings littered with bird eggs. The serpent egg was floating nearby, struggling to carry one of the eggs, which was about the same size as itself. The sight was so absurd I couldn't help but laugh. Stealing bird eggs now, are we? The serpent egg froze for a moment, then dropped the egg it was carrying. I caught it just in time and scooped up the serpent egg as well. It must have been terrified that I would actually eat it, so it brought back these bird eggs as an offering. Still chuckling, I reassured it. I was only joking yesterday. I won't eat you, but if I'm ever expelled from the sect, will you come with me? The serpent egg bobbed up and down in agreement. That evening, as I soaked in the cold spring, I heard a faint sound. Picking up the serpent egg from the water, I noticed it had developed a small crack. Clutching my chest, I felt our connection growing stronger. Sensing my joy, the serpent egg nuzzled against my face. The next day, while getting food at the dining hall, I overheard the chubby disciple sighing. Junior's in trouble. It turned out he had stolen the blazing cauldron from the Azure Peak sect, claiming it was a spiritual artifact needed to hatch the Phoenix egg. The egg had been burned for 3 days and nights, losing all its vitality, and the cauldron was destroyed as well. I walked away silently, not wanting to get involved. Meanwhile, the cracks on the serpent egg deepened, signaling its imminent hatching. After feeding it more of my heart's blood, I passed out for half a day. When I awoke, I instinctively reached for my chest. Thankfully, the serpent egg was still there, but something felt off. The egg's aura had changed. It was no longer the dense, intense presence I had grown familiar with. Instead, it felt lifeless, though its form remained the same. At that moment, a golden light erupted from Mount Crystalwood, illuminating the heavens. A massive dragon-shaped figure loomed over everything. Emerging from the cold spring, I saw the sect disciples gathered on the mountain, marveling at the spectacle. "Junior has succeeded," someone exclaimed. "It's the ancient divine serpent Serpentia." The sect elders stood at the observation platform, as one of them sliced open Junior's slender, pale hand. 12 elders surrounded him in a protective formation. The valley echoed with ethereal chants as Serpentia soared through the skies, its sleek, elegant body glinting like polished black gemstones in the sunlight. It coiled protectively around Lucas, whose otherworldly beauty made him seem like a celestial being descended to the mortal realm. From his lofty perch, Lucas addressed the crowd with a resounding voice. "From this day forward, I, Lucas, vow to shoulder the responsibility of revitalizing our sect. I will honor our master and uphold the glory of our order." Serpentia's every movement exuded grace and majesty, leaving all who beheld it in awe. Even Master, gazing upon the disciple he had nurtured since childhood, seemed moved to tears. "The heavens favor our sect," he murmured with relief. And yet the egg in my hands remained lifeless. I suddenly realized what had happened. It was a classic case of stealing the dragon and replacing it with the phoenix. A so-called divine savior? Nothing more than a thief. The moment I arrived at the gates of the sect, the golden light vanished, and the spiritual bond had already been formed. Serpentia, with her unparalleled beauty, stared blankly at Junior and stammered, "Master, I've finally found you." Lucas's expression was uneasy as he looked nervously at Master. Master shook his head and led everyone to kneel, chanting loudly, "Welcome, Serpentia." The elders and disciples of the sect all knelt in unison, chanting, "Welcome, Serpentia. May Serpentia bless the disciples of the sect with everlasting fortune." The crowd at Observation Terrace surrounded Lucas and Serpentia, kneeling in waves. Only I stood at the gates of the sect shouting, "You've got it wrong." Everyone was immersed in joy. My weak voice, devoid of spiritual power, floated in the air, unheard and unnoticed. I shouted, "Lucas, have you no shame? Serpentia was hatched by me." I stood at the entrance of the sect and kicked the once familiar grand wooden doors open with force. The door creaked loudly and everyone turned to look at me with confusion and contempt. Master's face stiffened and he scolded me, "Adrian, kneel." I dropped to my knees, staring at the master whom I had always revered. "Master, elders," I began. "Half a year ago, Junior and I, under Master's witness, each chose a divine egg. Junior chose the phoenix egg, and I chose the serpent egg. Now the phoenix egg has perished under Junior's care, and yesterday he switched my serpent egg while I was unaware." From afar, Serpentia looked at me, her willow-like brows furrowing. I raised my voice. "I've been feeding Serpentia with my own heart's blood every 2 weeks. Does the divine maiden still remember?" Serpentia's figure shifted slightly, as if she wanted to approach me, but Lucas raised his hand gently in front of her. She froze, as if bound by some unseen force. I turned to the crowd. "Master, please seek justice for me." The murmurs of the crowd grew restless as Lucas's face flushed. He opened his mouth, seemingly about to say something, but Master rose to his feet and, with a single palm strike, sent me flying to the observation terrace. Without spiritual power, my eyesight was no longer what it used to be. Only now did I get a good look at Serpentia. Overnight she had grown so much. Her flowing robes and haughty demeanor made her seem like a stranger. She stood by Lucas's side, her gaze cold and unfamiliar. Master's expression was calm. "Adrian, your spiritual roots are damaged. Must your character degrade as well?" I stared at him in confusion. "What do you mean by that, Master?" Master barked, "Divine justice, come." Immediately, divine justice transformed into a long whip. Before I could react, it struck my face with a brutal lash. The pain felt like lightning splitting my skin. Blood streamed from the wound, though the strength of the strike seemed somewhat restrained. Had it been at full force, I might have been a bloody mess by now. "Master," I began, "that day in the hall, you clearly—" Before I could finish, another lash landed squarely on my chest. Master had increased his strength this time. I coughed blood and collapsed, unable to get up. "Still daring to speak nonsense?" Master declared, holding divine justice with righteous authority. "That day in the hall, I personally witnessed Lucas giving the phoenix egg to you. It was your own lack of skill that failed to hatch the sacred creature. And now, you dare to slander others out of jealousy?" He sighed deeply, his voice filled with disappointment. "Did I teach you to act this way?" Understanding dawned on me. I let out a cold laugh. "Master, what did you teach me? To bully the weak and distort the truth like this?" Master's eyes darkened. He tightened his grip on divine justice and swung it with full force. "This is it," I thought. "This strike will scatter even an evil spirit's soul." I closed my eyes, preparing for the final blow, but it never came. Time dragged on. I could even hear the wind rustling through the mountain streams. I opened my eyes to find divine justice suspended mid-air. Master, channeling his golden core, gripped the whip with both hands, yet it refused to strike. The disciples, seeing this, turned in confusion toward the 12 elders. Finally, divine justice seemed to throw a tantrum, slumping lifelessly to the ground, as if exhausted. Lucas seized the moment, offering Master an excuse to save face. "Master must have been too merciful," he said hurriedly. "Adrian, you should thank Master." I scoffed. "Thank you, Master," I said, slowly sitting up. I looked at the panting Master and then turned my attention to Lucas. Serpentia was once the beloved pet of Yara, who tamed her with her own heart's blood. "Tell me, Junior, what method did you use to hatch Serpentia?" I exposed my chest, revealing scars both fresh and old, a gruesome sight. Lucas's eyes filled with tears. "Elder brother," he said, "how long are you going to keep this up? Must you even harm yourself? Why go to such lengths?" He suddenly tore open his own robes, revealing an unblemished chest marked by scars identical to mine. The resemblance was uncanny. Lucas truly was meticulous in his deception. I sighed. Enough. How could such a scheme be orchestrated by him alone? The crowd erupted. Their gazes shifted from disdain to outright hatred. Serpentia conjured an outer robe and draped it over Lucas protectively. Fury etched across her brow, she flicked her finger, and I was lifted 3 stories high before crashing down. My face hit the ground. My back felt broken, my legs twisted unnaturally. I lay on the observation terrace in a laughable, grotesque position, chuckling darkly. In stark contrast to Lucas, who shone like a brilliant pearl, I was a pitiful sight. Serpentia looked at me with disgust. "Wretch!" she spat. Imitating beauty's charms, I glanced around. The winds swirled ominously atop the Cloudview platform. My master, the elders, and the sect disciples stared at me as if I were some scoundrel. The mountain gate was carved by my hand. The steps were chiseled by me. The divine blade was earned by my efforts. The Cloudview platform was my creation. The abyss was sealed because I volunteered. I treated Starcrest Mountain as my home, yet somehow I was wrong. There was no longer any need to defend myself. No one would believe me anyway. I laughed bitterly, then spoke lightly. Disciple was wrong. A common man is innocent, yet treasuring a jade threatens his life. Later I was thrown into the icy depths of the frost pond as punishment, confined there for 3 months. But after receiving 2 lashes from the divine blade, how could I possibly survive 3 months? The restrictive wards I created now barred me from leaving. I couldn't ascend to the sect, nor descend to the mortal realms. They used the tools I invented to punish me, and everyone in the sect rejoiced at my downfall. After lying in the frost pond for an entire day and night, I finally scrambled up like a madman searching for food. The lifeless phoenix egg, now revealed in its true form, was no bigger than my fist. Its usual illusionary disguise was no longer visible to me. Seeing its real form, I chuckled foolishly. We're both useless to the sect, discarded into the frost pond like trash. Days passed, and no one came to check on me. I could only drink from the frigid pond to stave off hunger. On the 5th day, a disciple tried to bring me food. Harrison stood outside the ward holding a roasted chicken and called out to me, "Elder!" He laughed so gleefully and said if I barked like a dog, he'd throw me the chicken. I didn't have the energy to argue with him. After some time, he grew tired of mocking me and left in frustration. People always assume the worst of others. That day, I didn't let him accompany me into the abyss because I knew the journey was fraught with peril. Who knew I'd end up giving him another reason to hate me? By the 10th day, the icy water I drank made me hungrier and more desperate. I had passed out countless times and could no longer keep track. Perhaps it was my dizziness, but I thought I saw the phoenix egg emit a faint golden glow surrounding me. I wanted to examine it, but I fainted again. Every time I woke up, I found the phoenix egg nestled in my arms. I mocked myself. There was no difference in the egg. Was the golden glow just my imagination? Strangely, I felt slightly stronger, no longer as weak as before. Somehow, I endured another 10 days. Eventually, I confirmed the phoenix egg was indeed radiating golden light, healing me with its dwindling life force. That's why whenever I woke up, it seemed like nothing but a lifeless shell. Starving and delirious, I held the phoenix egg in my pale hands and muttered, "Everyone wants me dead, yet you waste your life force to save me." Just as I finished speaking, the ward at the entrance suddenly lifted. It hadn't even been 3 months yet. Did they finally remember me? I couldn't see clearly who had come, only that I was fed, cleaned up, and thrown at the mountain gate. Starcrest Mountain has produced such a disgrace, but I've already delivered a light punishment, said my master with an air of righteousness. You've ruined the treasures of Azure Sky Sect, Adrian. Do you admit your guilt? Finally having the strength to speak after eating, I replied firmly, I don't admit it. It was Lucas's doing. Why should I take the blame? My master scoffed coldly and turned to another group of people. And now he dares to slander Lucas? The Phoenix egg is in his possession. Not only has he killed our sacred relic, but he has also destroyed sect treasures. I cannot keep him alive. Take him away. Dead or alive, Starcrest Mountain will no longer concern itself. My master sounded every bit the noble sage, and yet I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. So this was the man I had called master. They lifted the restrictions on me just to make me take the blame for Lucas. The disciples from Azure Sky Sect exchanged glances, then said, We'll take him back and await our master's verdict. The mountain winds howled. In the distance, I could see a figure dressed in dark robes standing on the Cloudview platform. Beside them stood the proud and upright Lucas. Though my eyesight wasn't sharp, I could tell it was the two of them. After all, the sect's attire was always plain and simple, except for Serpentia, who wore black robes. I sneered. Let bygones be bygones. I'll treat Starcrest Mountain the same way I'll treat Serpentia, as nothing but a passing dream. The disciples of Azure Sky Sect had likely never encountered someone like me before, neither able to walk nor fly. Afraid I'd die on the journey, they used their spiritual energy to protect my heart. All the while I clutched the Phoenix egg tightly. I must tell the truth to the elders of Azure Sky Sect. I refuse to believe there isn't a single place in this world that upholds justice. But what if Azure Sky Sect is unreasonable too? At that thought, my hope dimmed, and the egg slipped from my arms. A disciple quickly caught it and returned it to me, saying, Don't lose hope, friend. Our master sent me to bring you back safely. If you've given up on life, there's no need to ascend the mountain. Exhausted from the journey, I dared not let myself relax, fearing I'd never wake again if I fainted. I swore vengeance with my life. I would reclaim the heavenly eye, the divine blade, and the wards I had created. Everyone would pay for what they had done. At some point I fell asleep. When I woke, I was already at Azure Sky Sect. I heard someone sigh. What a shame. The poor child is battered beyond recognition, a diamond in the rough, tossed into the mud. There was genuine pity and concern in their voice. I turned my head slowly to see an elderly man with white hair and a long beard. Was this the master of Azure Sky Sect, Elder Oliver? His face looked strangely familiar. Suddenly I remembered. Wasn't he the old man who had tricked me into giving him my warding spell 5 years ago on Lucas's birthday? That day my master had sent me down the mountain to welcome guests. Cultivators always arrived on flying swords. There were no fellow cultivators willing to hike up the mountain with me. Truth be told, they likely feared upsetting Lucas again and ruining the mood, so they found an excuse to leave me at the base. But unexpectedly, an elderly man appeared, trudging up the mountain on foot. His frail figure and trembling steps made it clear he wasn't from any sect. He introduced himself as the worldly uncle of a disciple from Sage's Mountain, and said he wanted to visit his nephew. I helped him up the stairs step by step, but after climbing just 1/10 of the way, he suddenly refused to go any further and insisted I carry him. Feeling a bit amused, I indulged his antics. At least he was willing to talk to me, unlike others. So I carried him on my back. Halfway up, he started complaining again, hungry, thirsty. With no food on hand, I used a charm to summon water for him. He praised my charm work, calling it simple yet elegant and of the highest quality. I laughed at his words, recalling how my master had always criticized my charms for being too crude, dismissing them as trash. You must not know much, old man, I teased. But he only chuckled and replied, You cheeky thing, wasting your talents here. Why don't you come with me and farm instead? I politely declined, but he wasn't done. He asked for some of my charms, claiming they might ward off evil. Thinking he had no spiritual power, I gave them to him. Who knew that somehow my charms would later become famous across all the sects? When my master recognized my handiwork, Sage's Mountain claimed credit, boasting that their charms were the best in the land, and used this reputation to attract countless disciples. Now, as I lay gravely injured, I wanted to call out to that old man, but my throat was too dry to make a sound. I could only lift a trembling finger. The old man noticed I was awake and helped me sit up, motioning for a disciple to bring me water. Struggling to speak, I rasped out a "Thank you, Elder Oliver." He waved it off. "Don't thank me yet. I can't save you. Your spiritual veins are completely severed, and there's not a trace of spiritual energy left in your body. Broken bones, whip marks all over. How many lives do you think you have? Didn't I tell you 5 years ago to come down the mountain with me? But you refused. Then, 3 years ago, you went to the abyss to slay demons. Did anyone thank you for it? No, they couldn't wait to get rid of you." His voice broke, and he turned away, his shoulders shaking slightly. "Look at you now, a cultivator reduced to this state. What future do you have left? Those with softer hearts would have ended it themselves by now." I thought I saw his eyes redden, and I was momentarily stunned. Elder Oliver suddenly turned back to me. "Don't misunderstand. I'm not telling you to give up. You probably think I'm nagging, but I'll say it anyway. How could you give something as valuable as the celestial eye to your junior without a fight?" I whispered. "They took it from me." He sighed deeply, exasperated. "You fool." At that moment my stomach growled, breaking the tension. The disciples around me, unused to such a mundane sound, stared wide-eyed. I scratched my head sheepishly. "Do you have any bread?" Elder Oliver frowned. "No bread. Plenty of roast chicken, though." In the sect, everyone called me Junior, and I eventually began calling the old man Master, just like the others. On the day I officially became his disciple, he gave me a sidelong glance. 5 years ago, I told you to follow me, and now you finally show up?" I quickly bowed my head to cut him off. "Master, please don't lecture me. Spiritual herbs and celestial flowers are useless to me anyway. I can't absorb them. Despite Elena's best efforts to teach me techniques, I couldn't avenge myself. It wasn't her fault. It was my lack of spiritual energy. Without it, my movements were no different from a mortal wielding a sword." Elder Oliver often sighed when he looked at me, lamenting, "A diamond in the rough, wasted." He noticed I always carried around an egg during my cultivation. Once he pointed at me and scolded, "What's the matter with you? Can't let go of your past? Have I ever let you go hungry or cold?" That egg, once belonging to the phoenix, had given me the last of its spiritual energy when it lay dormant in the frozen pond. It wasn't dead, just in a deep slumber, and I didn't know when it might awaken. The phoenix egg feared the cold, and on the icy mountaintop of our sect, it often shivered its way into my bedroll at night. I used the spiritual herbs Elena gave me to bathe the egg, and every time Master would scold me. Watching the old-timer puff up with indignation always made me laugh. Then I'd say seriously, "No, Master, reminds me of my vengeance." Master's face would instantly darken, and he'd leave to buy wine, likely after exhausting every text and medical manual in search of a cure for me. Even Serpentia had been visiting recently. Though Master always chased her away with a beating, she'd mutter about offering the celestial eye as atonement before retreating. Master was good to me, but I often assured him that my revenge was my burden alone. That only made him angrier. He called Zephyr, a former master and the head of Sage's Mountain, a cunning snake. He cursed Lucas as a corrupt, black-hearted schemer, and Serpentia, a traitorous, two-faced wretch. 3 months into my stay at the sect, news spread across the land. Lucas and Serpentia had become partners. With the celestial eye in their possession, their cultivation soared, and their union elevated Sage's Mountain to the top sect in the world. It was far from good news for me. The distance between us only grew wider. A few days later, Master called me over. He was sipping wine and scolding me at the same time. "You've been skipping meals. What, planning to use your chin to stab the folks at Sage's Mountain to death?" I popped a peanut into my mouth, but Master swatted it away and shoved a drumstick into my hand. "Eat this. Stop snacking on things that won't put any meat on your bones. As I gnawed on the chicken, we sat drinking together. He stared at me for a long time, and I thought he'd had too much, so I kept eating. Suddenly he said, "Adrian, you say you were once a plant. What kind of plant?" "Straw," I replied. He burst into laughter, tears streaming down his face. "No wonder you're so scrawny," and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I laughed too. Master seemed like he wanted to laugh again but held it in, letting out a slow burp instead. Then he took my hand and said, "In my youth, I used to sell grain in the mortal world. It was only through a stroke of luck that I was able to join the Celestial Cloud sect. I sold rice, and your true form is straw. What a fated connection we share. Child, don't hold it against me when I scold you every day, all right?" Master's eyes grew redder and redder as he spoke. I replied, "How could I blame you, Master? You've always protected me and cared for me." "I'm nothing but a blade of grass," he interrupted me before I could finish, tears of laughter still glistening in his eyes. "Silly child, even if you're just a blade of grass, you're a one-of-a-kind blade of grass in this world. No matter who dares to bully you, this old-timer won't stand for it." When I woke up, 3 days had already passed. I couldn't help but wonder if Master had bought fake wine again. I'd warned him before not to haggle over prices unnecessarily. Wasn't this delaying my cultivation? Before I could even step out of my room, Elena shoved a wooden box into my hands, her eyes red as if she'd been gravely injured. "Adrian, Master has ascended." "That's impossible. He was just drinking with me 3 days ago." I almost stumbled, the wooden box slipping from my grasp and falling to the ground. Out of it tumbled the celestial eye. He went to retrieve the celestial eye? I felt as if I'd been struck by a heavy blow, choking on my own grief and unable to speak. He made me sleep for 3 days. But his cultivation was so poor. "Elena, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come to the Celestial Cloud sect." Elena, tears streaming down her face, helped me up. Suddenly, she coughed up a mouthful of blood. After a long pause, she looked at me with reddened eyes, her gaze resolute. "Junior, you must use the Celestial Eye to enhance your cultivation quickly. Only then can you protect the Celestial Cloud sect and retrieve Master's body." The entire Celestial Cloud sect didn't even have time to grieve. Even the outer disciples rushed to the mountain to cultivate. Master had drawn lightning upon himself to injure Serpentia in order to retrieve the Celestial Eye. Elena had risked her life to bring it back, exhausting her cultivation in the process. She told me that before Master left, he said, "Everyone's trampling all over the Celestial Cloud sect now. I'll make them see who truly stands as the #1 sect in the world." When I held the Celestial Eye, I felt a strange sense of familiarity. It grew hot and red, as if greeting an old friend. Then, it trembled slightly, like a frightened, small animal. I didn't even have time to use it to repair my spiritual veins before I heard a commotion at the mountain gate. Someone had broken in. Lucas stood at the gate, Serpentia always by his side. Behind him were only 1 or 2 disciples of Sage's sect. I grabbed my sword and walked out. All the disciples of the Celestial Cloud sect were ready to confront the intruder. Lucas smirked when he saw me. "A dog cast out by Sage has come to the Celestial Cloud sect and actually managed to pick up a sword? Or is it that the spiritual energy here is just that abundant? Serpentia, I think this place would make a fine training ground for Sage's outer disciples." Elena signaled me to retreat. I nodded to her, reassuring her not to worry. I replied, "Lucas, your mouth is as filthy as always." Serpentia frowned at me, as if she had something to say. Lucas sneered. "Do you think the people of the Celestial Cloud sect can protect you, Elder? That old man is dead. I am the pearl of Sage's sect. The Celestial Cloud sect has stolen a sacred artifact and deserves annihilation. Hand over the Celestial Eye, or the entire Celestial Cloud sect will perish along with you." My face darkened. "Lucas, how dare you mention my master? You were the one who first stole treasures from the Celestial Cloud sect. The Celestial Eye was mine to begin with. Even if I threw it away, there's no reason to hand it over to you." Lucas's gaze turned cold and sinister. I continued. Oh, and another thing that belongs to me, I pointed at Serpentia. That thing is nothing but trash I discarded. You've treated her as a treasure for so long. Serpentia's dark brown eyes briefly flickered, but she said nothing. She simply looked at me. It seemed she wanted to take a step forward to speak, but Lucas stopped her. He let out a cold snort and sent a palm strike toward me. Adrian, how dare you insult me? It seems you've learned nothing worthwhile in the Celestial Cloud sect, only that your tongue has grown sharper. Behind me, the disciples of the Celestial Cloud sect could no longer hold back and wanted to step forward. I motioned for them to stay back, and they reluctantly complied. I deliberately caught Lucas's palm strike. His skills didn't seem as formidable as the rumors claimed. If he'd truly gained divine power through his bond with Serpentia, his strength shouldn't have been so underwhelming. Lucas seemed pleased with himself and leaned in close to whisper, I know, Elder. You're not planning to use the celestial eye to enhance your cultivation. You're trying to make yourself as handsome as me, aren't you? Everyone in Sage's sect knows that from the very beginning, you've been coveting Serpentia like a rogue. You've always been jealous of me, competing for Master's favor since we were young. Elder, you'll never win. Elena stepped forward to shield me. You villain! My junior is 10,000 times better than you. Lucas's expression twisted in anger as he waved his hand. Elena was flung dozens of meters away, spitting blood. He laughed. So, this is what passes for talent here? Weak, just like your master. Disciples of the Celestial Cloud sect drew their swords in unison. At this moment, Serpentia seemed to shake off some kind of restriction and finally managed to take a step forward. I'm sorry. It was Elder Oliver who told me you were. Enough, Lucas barked, cutting her off. Serpentia's eyes held a complex emotion I couldn't quite place, like a stray kitten staring at me longingly. I glared at them, unsure of what new schemes they were planning. Lucas sneered. You're being disobedient today. I said you could only speak one sentence, and you've said 1.5. Don't think I don't know. You've been sneaking around the Celestial Cloud sect under the guise of some secret mission. I'll punish you later. In that moment, I understood why Serpentia had seemed so restricted. That day, 12 elders had combined their powers to bind Serpentia and Lucas in a spiritual contract. This made Lucas her master, forcing her to obey his every command. If she defied him, not even a goddess like her could escape annihilation. With Serpentia at his side, even if the disciples of Mount Sage were reduced to just a handful, they could still rival an entire army. I silently thought, this isn't good, then retreated 3 steps and murmured under my breath, barrier, rise. The barrier I set up was strong, further fortified with my spells. But against Serpentia's overwhelming spiritual power, I wasn't sure it could withstand even a single strike. Lucas stepped aside and gestured, Serpentia, go retrieve my celestial eye. Serpentia approached me, standing just beyond my barrier. She spoke each word slowly and deliberately. Can you give me the celestial eye? In your dreams, I replied. Her brows furrowed, her expression shifting rapidly. Her eyes reddened, and her hands clenched tightly. With a restrained and barely audible voice, she said, I'll hurt you. Please give it to me, I beg you. Such a pleading tone. What was she doing? What if I refused? Was Serpentia planning to crush me to death this time? At that moment, Lucas shouted from behind, Serpentia, I'm losing patience, move! Serpentia turned and roared at Lucas, her eyes bloodshot and her face pale. Suddenly, she coughed up a mouthful of blood. Lucas looked on in shock, his expression tightening. Then almost immediately, Serpentia knelt before him and said, I'm sorry, Master. I'm so sorry, I was wrong. The disciples of the Azure Order were stunned. The ancient goddess Serpentia, bowing and apologizing to a mere cultivator? Yet the disciples of Mount Sage seemed unperturbed, as if they were watching an entertaining spectacle. A bright smile gradually spread across Lucas's face. Go on, Serpentia. Do something to make your master happy. Serpentia let out a furious roar and transformed into a massive black dragon, coiling in the skies above the Azure Order. The winds howled, Clouds churned, and thunder rumbled across the heavens. Birds and beasts scattered in fear. "Disciples of the Azure Order, form the array," I commanded, standing at the array's core and channeling all my power to confront Serpentia. The black dragon's eyes glistened with tears, but its strength didn't waver. With just one strike, my barrier shattered. It had managed to withstand a single blow, but the second strike would have to be borne by my own body. The dragon spiraled above, howling, refusing to unleash a second attack. The sky opened up, rain pouring in torrents. Lucas urged repeatedly, "Serpentia!" The enormous dragon let out a mournful cry and mustered all its strength to dive down. I stood at the array's core, resolute in my decision to face it head-on. My vision blurred as rain obscured my eyes. If I was to die, so be it. Yet my heart was filled with regret. I hated that the Azure Order had to suffer on my behalf. I hated that I couldn't avenge my master. Suddenly the sky erupted in golden light. A piercing bird cry, full of fury, resounded. Like a dazzling bolt of lightning, Phoenix descended, shielding the gates of the Azure Order with her expansive wings. She protected us. The storm intensified, making it hard to see clearly. All I could discern was the golden light and black mist entwined in battle. Phoenix held the upper hand. Serpentia seemed unwilling to continue the fight, enduring Phoenix's relentless strikes. After several exchanges, Serpentia was clearly at a disadvantage. Eventually, both divine beings shifted into their human forms. Phoenix gripped Serpentia by the neck, her tone stern. "How dare you try to kill him?" Serpentia collapsed onto the ground, her waist and legs forcefully broken by Phoenix. Her face drained of color as she looked at me from afar. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Phoenix, unrelenting, pressed on. "How dare you try to kill him? Answer me." Her dark eyes burned with fury, her sharp gaze cutting through Serpentia. Her pale face radiated a chilling aura. Lucas trembled as he approached from outside the gates and said, "Phoenix, do you still remember me?" "It's me. I fed you spiritual flowers and herbs every day, and I helped you cultivate with the flame cauldron. Do you remember me?" Phoenix released Serpentia and turned her icy gaze toward Lucas. "It's you." My heart skipped a beat. Could this Phoenix also harbor feelings for Lucas? Lucas's lips curled into a slight smile as he stepped closer to Phoenix, his eyes brimming with fervor. "It's me, Lucas." He reached out to touch Phoenix's face, but her eyes turned red, sharp as daggers. "Was it this hand that struck him earlier?" she asked, her tone cutting. Lucas didn't understand her intent and nodded, "Yes." In an instant, his arm twisted into an unnatural angle, accompanied by his agonized scream. Still seething with anger, Phoenix turned her mocking gaze to Serpentia. "It wasn't him. He's nothing like him, and yet you could confuse the two?" Phoenix's expression darkened as she stood beside me. In a commanding voice, she ordered, "Serpentia, aren't you going to take your master back? If you delay any longer, he might lose that arm." The younger disciples of the Azure Order, emboldened, gathered around Phoenix and me, shouting, "Go! Go! Go!" Lucas, in a pitiful state, repeatedly cried out for Serpentia to take him back. "I need to see Master," he wailed. Phoenix coldly replied, "Soon enough you'll see your master." Before descending the mountain, Serpentia glanced back at me, her expression complex. Phoenix casually shifted her tall frame, blocking Serpentia's line of sight. Then, in a soft and gentle tone, Phoenix asked me, "Are you all right?" I hesitated before replying, "I'm fine, thank you." "There's no need for thanks between us," she said. "If I hadn't arrived in time, the Azure Order would have faced a catastrophe today." Elena approached and said, "Now that the Azure Order is safe, you should take the Celestial Eye to Phoenix for her recovery." I did as instructed. Whether it was the power of the Celestial Eye or the blessing of my master, Phoenix eventually emerged healed. Later, Phoenix came to my room, her expression heavy. "What's your name?" she asked. "Adrian," I replied. She nodded, her gaze warm and gentle. "Adrian, a beautiful name." Glancing at the broken eggshells scattered in the room, I couldn't help but ask, "How exactly were you reborn, Phoenix? Did I help you in some way?" Phoenix nodded. I could feel your presence. I wanted to meet you. But earlier it looked like you were being cooked, I said hesitantly. We all thought you. I scratched my head, leaving the sentence unfinished. Phoenix smiled faintly. I did die. After Lucas discarded me, I thought my end had come. Fortunately, you were reborn through your phoenix-like nirvana, which only strengthens my resolve to protect you. She sighed softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Nirvana is exhausting, she murmured, her eyes shimmering with a gentle light, as if filled with liquid moonlight. I sighed too. Then Serpentia must have sensed my presence before, but I still don't understand, why did she kill Master? Phoenix snorted coldly. She's just a fool. When Serpentia hatched, she must have mistaken Lucas, whose aura resembles yours, for you, and even formed a spiritual bond with him. She couldn't disobey your master either. If only I had come out earlier. I spoke firmly, word by word. I will make them pay in blood. Master always said, reason with people, but with beasts you must beat them until they can no longer bear their fangs. Phoenix leaned in close to me and whispered in a soft tone, I will always stay by your side, Adrian. I can even become your spirit beast, like Serpentia, ready to kneel and admit her mistakes whenever you command. I shook my head. What I need is for you to become my weapon. But if you ever want to leave, you can leave at any time. My cultivation isn't sufficient yet. If I want revenge, I must rely on your divine power. I lowered my head, speaking with utmost sincerity, afraid Phoenix would reject me. I reiterated, you can leave any time you wish. This is my battle, after all. No, Adrian. I looked up at her, startled. She gazed at me with solemnity. You can achieve anything you set your mind to. You don't know the true extent of your potential. It's not you who needs a weapon, it's me who needs you. Her eyes sparkled, emotions swirling within them, so intense and fervent that when our gazes met, my cheeks burned as if set aflame. She chuckled softly and her voice was low and teasing. Adrian, get some sleep. Her laughter sent a tingling sensation straight to my heart. I froze, not quite understanding what she was implying. My thoughts scrambled, and I silently recited passages from classic philosophy, trying to calm the chaotic emotions stirring within me. She began to remove her outer garments, leaving only her black underclothes. I quickly shut my eyes, not daring to look further. What are you doing? I asked, my voice strained. Undressing to sleep, of course, she replied innocently. Her tone was so matter-of-fact that it sounded almost pure, but even with my eyes closed, I could imagine her looking at me with a playful, tender expression that was anything but innocent. She was clearly toying with me. There's an empty room to the right. Go sleep there, I said, trying to sound resolute. Phoenix didn't respond, but I could sense her moving closer. I shifted away, still keeping my eyes squeezed shut. Sure enough, she leaned in and whispered in my ear, but I don't want to sleep alone. She was so close I could feel the heat of her breath against my skin. This woman was utterly incorrigible, completely unreasonable. Where on earth had she learned such behavior the day she hatched? I pushed her gently toward the door, careful not to touch her too much. Even through the fabric of her clothes, I could feel her skin radiating a startling warmth. She laughed softly as she retreated toward the door. Just as she stepped over the threshold, she turned back and whispered, "Good night." I closed the door and finally dared to open my eyes, exhaling a deep, relieved breath. Despite her antics, I found that the knot of frustration in my heart had loosened slightly. For the first time in a while, I was able to sleep peacefully. The next day, Phoenix used her divine sight to heal my wounds and attempt to restore my spiritual veins. I thought the combination of her divine power and sight would help me regain my former strength. But after several days of effort, there was no progress. Phoenix worked tirelessly, yet my condition remained unchanged and my anxiety only grew. I watched helplessly as the divine sight, which Master had fought so hard to secure for me, seemed to have no effect. During the day, I trained relentlessly with Elena, focusing solely on deadly techniques. At night, I burned the midnight oil, drawing talismans. I refused to accept defeat. I vowed to bring Zephyr, Lucas, and the entire Sage Mountain to their knees, using their corpses to weave a banner to summon Master's spirit. Every night under the moonlight, I revealed my true form to recuperate. One evening, Phoenix appeared suddenly and woke me, her expression grave. "Adrian, where is your root?" she asked. I froze. "What root?" "Your spiritual root," she clarified, her tone serious. "I didn't understand before why Lucas's aura resembled yours so closely that even Serpentia mistook him for you. But now it makes sense." "What do you mean?" "You only possess a straw-like spiritual root. It must be in Lucas's possession. That's why, even with the divine sight and restored spiritual veins, you're unable to recover." Phoenix looked at me with deep concern. "Do you remember when you might have lost it, when you became no different from a mortal?" I closed my eyes and thought back. When Zephyr brought me to Sage Mountain, I was spared the hardships of storms and tribulations. I may have been just a blade of grass, but my talent wasn't lacking. Within a year I had reached the nascent soul stage, leading the charge to defend Sage Mountain. But 3 years ago, after obtaining the divine sight and the divine egg, I lost all spiritual power. It must have been him. I stood abruptly. "I'm going to take it back." Phoenix stopped me. "They have Serpentia and the protection of Sage Mountain. This won't be an easy battle." My eyes burned with rage. "Then what do you suggest? That I kneel and beg them to return my spiritual root? To give me back my master?" Phoenix's eyes were filled with sorrow, but she slowly closed them. "We need to stage a show for them. Spread the word that Azure Peak is challenging Sage Mountain for the title of the strongest sect in the realm. Sage Mountain had taught me one thing: the strong are always right, and the weak wield their blades only against those weaker than themselves." I stood at the gates of Sage Mountain and called out, "Sage Elders, Adrian has returned to pay you a visit." Serpentia transformed into its true form, coiling menacingly atop the mountain. Lucas, Zephyr, and the other elders stood upon its back, looking down on us with disdain. "Traitor," Master roared. "How dare you return?" He sent a divine strike hurtling toward my face, but Phoenix intercepted it and deflected it back with force. Master staggered, nearly falling into the valley below. Lucas, clad in battle armor, frowned deeply and commanded Serpentia to take its position. He knit his brows and said sternly, "It was our master who brought you to Sage Mountain and taught you to cultivate. And now you collude with outsiders to storm our gates? What a disgrace for a cultivator, turning a blind eye to the heavenly path." "Ethan, stop now. Don't be foolish." In front of Zephyr, he always put on this righteous and generous facade. And now, he was trying to reason with me as if he were some radiant pearl. Phoenix raised an eyebrow and said to me softly, "Are you certain the divine root is with him?" I drew my sword and charged, aiming straight for Lucas's vital point. Serpentia let out a soft cry, erecting a barrier in its wake. But against divine power, it was futile. I was thrown back, crashing to the ground, coughing up blood. Only then did Phoenix reluctantly step forward to help me up. Elena rushed over in a panic to check my injuries, but I waved her off. Eyes red with fury, I hurled a talisman. "Break for me." It was a talisman I had crafted specifically to counter divine power. The barrier was blown open, leaving a small hole. No one at Sage's Mountain had anticipated that I could breach Serpentia's barrier. To them, it was like an ant challenging a giant. Lucas, caught off guard, cried out in alarm, "Serpentia, save me!" Serpentia, guarding the sect members, failed to react in time. Phoenix intercepted my sword, shielding Lucas behind her. In an instant, Serpentia's tail struck me, sending me tumbling to the ground once more. Phoenix coughed up a mouthful of blood, casting a lingering glance at Lucas before she returned to the ground. I shouted angrily, "Ungrateful traitor, have you forgotten who your master is? Without me you'd be nothing, a worthless stray." Phoenix, like Serpentia that day, seemed to suffer a backlash from her contract. As a spiritual beast, she knelt before me, blood dripping from her lips as she slapped herself repeatedly in apology. Seeing this, Lucas appeared deep in thought, his expression shifting as he returned to the mountain. Meanwhile, the sect reorganized at the foot of the mountain. I spent an entire day and night berating Phoenix from dawn to dusk until I finally fell asleep. Phoenix remained kneeling by my bedside all the while, only sneaking off deep into the night to find Lucas. Tears streaming down her face, she apologized. "Lucas, did it hurt that day?" Lucas, bewildered and unsure of how to respond, simply stared at her. Phoenix gently touched his arm, her voice trembling. "I actually broke your arm, Lucas. Do you hate me for it?" She sighed and knelt slowly. "Lucas, if you've come to see me, it must mean you're willing to give me a chance. But alas, I am no longer free. I am now that vile man's spirit beast." Then with newfound determination she added, "But no matter what, I will protect you, even if it costs me my life." Lucas suddenly understood. Both Phoenix and Serpentia were bound by contracts, forced into actions they couldn't control. "How could I hate you?" he said softly. Phoenix embraced Lucas. "Then take me as your own," she pleaded. Lucas hesitated. "But you are his spirit beast." Phoenix gazed at him with a bittersweet smile. "If you offer that vile man's master's corpse in exchange for me, he'll agree for sure. That simple?" Phoenix nodded. When I awoke, the gates of Sage's Mountain were wide open. Phoenix and Lucas stood side by side. Furious, I began to curse. "You shameless pair! When did you start colluding? Get back here right now!" Phoenix coughed up another mouthful of blood, casting reluctant glances back at Lucas as she returned to my side. Lucas waved her off, smirking. "Adrian, take a look. This is your master." The old-timer stood there, blackened from head to toe by lightning, clutching a half-burnt talisman, the lightning-summoning talisman I had drawn. Tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. "Master," Lucas chuckled. "Good senior brother, let's make a deal. No need for swords and bloodshed. I'll trade Elder Oliver for your spirit beast and your heavenly eye. What do you say?" I froze, glaring at Phoenix in rage. Phoenix avoided my gaze, guilt written all over her face. At that moment, Elena tugged at my sleeve. "Junior brother, Master wouldn't want to see you take such risks. Don't trust him." "You have the time it takes for an incense stick to burn," Lucas warned, "or I won't hesitate to feed this old man to the pigs. Besides, senior brother, the heavenly eye is useless to you, isn't it?" Gritting my teeth, I growled, "Fine." Under the witness of Sage's mountain elders, I severed my arm to dissolve the contract with Phoenix and handed over the heavenly eye. Master's body was returned home, and the sect held a funeral for Oliver. Kneeling before the memorial hall, I wept bitterly. "It's all my fault. I killed Master." Elena stroked my head, looking at me tenderly. "Once upon a time, Master told all the disciples a story. Hundreds of years ago, a grain seller, chased by bandits, encountered an injured immortal. To save the grain seller, the immortal fought to the death, his body left in a gruesome state. The grain seller planted a single grain beside him and, following the immortal's dying words, joined the sect to cultivate. That place later became known as the Jade Platform. Who would have thought you and Master share such a deep connection?" I handed the heavenly eye to Elena. "Senior sister, the heavenly eye is still in my possession. I'll help you restore your spiritual veins." Elena embraced me joyfully, tapping my forehead. "You little rascal, making me worry for days. I was so afraid the heavenly eye would fall into the wrong hands. How could I protect the sect and my junior brother then?" She wiped her tears and asked, "Could it be that Phoenix is pretending to defect?" I winked at her. The disciples informed us that something else was kneeling outside the gates, Serpentia. Lucas needed a new spirit beast and would have to dissolve the previous contract. I walked out to face her. "What were Master's final words to you?" "Elder Oliver said you were the one who fed me your heart's blood." "And?" "He said Sage's Mountain knows his kindness but repaid him with cruelty, disgrace, and suffering. He told me not to aid the wicked any longer." I turned and walked back into the gates, leaving Serpentia kneeling in the rain. The day Lucas and Phoenix formed their contract, I climbed Sage's mountain alone, ascending the steps I had carved with my own hands. My heart felt light and unburdened. Zephyr stood at the mountain gate with his divine weapon, sensing my approach. "Who goes there? What business do you have?" "Congratulations," I called, coming to a halt and meeting his gaze. "Congratulations on my ascension to Master of Zephyr." Zephyr's divine blade trembled slightly, his face pale with rage. "You insolent traitor," he bellowed. As his sword came slashing toward me, I shifted my body lightly, countering with a flick of my fingers against the sword's edge. A faint ringing sound echoed. "What a fine sword," I sighed. Zephyr seemed to realize something and roared, "Summon the spirit beasts!" Harrison stumbled in, disheveled and flustered. "Master," he stammered, "Phoenix is throwing a tantrum. She says cutting her hand hurts too much and refuses the spirit bond." At this, I effortlessly pried open Zephyr's gnarled fingers, and to Harrison's astonishment, I snatched the divine blade from his grasp. I smiled and asked Harrison, "Harry, may I go watch the spectacle?" Harrison collapsed to the side as I strode through the familiar mountain gates with ease. Phoenix, dressed in a luxurious white robe, sat perched on the cloud terrace, stubbornly refusing to cut her hand, her behavior utterly unreasonable. Lucas was beside her, coaxing and cajoling, but stopped as soon as he saw me. The 12 elders and the disciples of Sage Mountain looked tense, as if facing a great enemy. Phoenix noticed me too, her elegant features finally relaxing. She crossed the distance in a few quick strides, her tone slightly petulant. "Addie, you're late." At that moment, Lucas seemed to grasp the situation, his hands patting himself down in panic before letting out a furious roar. "You all conspired to steal my spiritual root." Phoenix, now standing on the cloud terrace, was enjoying the unfolding drama like a spectator at a play. I addressed the divine blade in my hand. "You've suffered much in his possession." The blade surged with an imposing energy, its aura sharp and commanding. "Ah, yes," I murmured. "This is the true weapon I once pulled from the jaws of a dragon." Drawing the blade, I moved like a streak of light. The 12 elders, slightly more skilled than Zephyr, began hurling all manner of talismans and treasures at me in desperation. Yet the divine blade only grew stronger, its light flashing brilliantly, its energy like a storm, its shadow like a phantom. The sound of the blade slicing through flesh was exhilarating, and for the first time in years my body felt as powerful as it once had. Phoenix clapped her hands in delight from the side. The elders fell one by one, sprawled across the cloud terrace amidst a gruesome scene of severed limbs and entrails, the sight enough to churn even the strongest stomachs. They whimpered and begged for mercy, much like I had once knelt and pleaded for justice. Phoenix waved a delicate hand dismissively. "What a mess. No matter, Addie. I'll build you a new cloud terrace." Lucas cowered behind the 12 elders, his expression wild and his teeth clenched as he pointed at the Sage Mountain disciples behind me. "Attack! Kill this monster!" With the elders present, they might have had some courage to challenge me. But now, with a mere turn of my head, everyone retreated 10 meters in fear. Lucas trembled, his eyes wide with desperation. "I am the pearl of this sect, the husband of the goddess. You wouldn't dare kill me. Aren't you afraid of divine retribution?" I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Serpentia said she's never shared any marital bond with you. Or perhaps you've already moved on to Phoenix in the past few days." Phoenix's eyes widened even more than Lucas's, and she hastily waved her hands. "Don't spout nonsense. I find him repulsive." Lucas's eyes turned red with fury. "You pretended to be kind to me, only to steal my divine root, rendering me unable to use the celestial eye." "Phoenix, you schemed against me so meticulously." Phoenix maintained her composure, though her tone betrayed a simmering anger. "You stole Adrian's divine root, his spirit beast, and his celestial eye. You even killed his master. You should be grateful it's Addie who's here to settle the score with you today." She then addressed the crowd. "If anyone dares to disrupt Adrian's enjoyment today, I won't hesitate to turn them to ash." The disciples of Sage Mountain retreated even further at her words. I set the divine blade down and walked up to Lucas. "Junior, who else is helping you?" I glanced at the group, their faces pale and their legs trembling. "Who among you conspired with Lucas? Step forward now and I might spare you." The crowd was stunned into silence, their expressions frozen in fear. Lucas's face was ashen as he stared at me. With a wave of my hand, I brought 2 figures from the mountain gate to the forefront. Lucas suddenly clutched his face and began to scream uncontrollably. He dropped to his knees, pleading, "Adrian, please, just kill me." I smiled as I untied the celestial binding rope from Zephyr. The truth is out. Lucas and Zephyr had colluded, stealing my sacred artifact, murdering my master, and disgracing the sect. Their crimes were unforgivable. The disciples of Sage Mountain could no longer suppress their fear and disgust, some even letting out faint cries. I placed a sword between Lucas and Zephyr. "Only one of you will leave here alive. Fight for it." Lucas remained frozen, while Zephyr seized the sword. His expression was one of shock. "Master, you want to kill me?" Zephyr closed his eyes, saying nothing. Lucas grew more deranged, shouting, "Master, you were the one afraid of Adrian surpassing you, so I took his divine root for you. You feared Adrian would hatch Serpentia, so you cut open my chest and made me impersonate him. All of this was for you." "Enough!" Zephyr's patience snapped and he drew the sword. Lucas shed a few hot tears looking at me. "It's fine. I've won. I am the true disciple Master loves most." The disciples of Sage Mountain muttered among themselves, their disdain evident. I chuckled. "How pitifully foolish. Very well, you've won." As the pearl of Zephyr's sword glinted, a burst of white light erupted. The blade was caught mid-air by Serpentia's bare hand, the tip only an inch from Lucas's throat. Lucas slowly opened his eyes, stunned. "You." He hadn't expected the one to save him would be Serpentia. Phoenix, who had been idly watching, suddenly appeared beside me. She spoke slowly and deliberately to Serpentia. "I warned you. Anyone who ruins Addie's fun will be turned to ash." As she spoke, her golden form began to manifest faintly. Serpentia glanced at me, her lashes trembling, and addressed Lucas with a cold detachment. "You shouldn't die so easily." Lucas's expression instantly shifted from joy to fear. "What are you trying to do? You were part of it too. You harmed him, killed his master." Phoenix's face was solemn, her gaze razor-sharp, and she was about to reveal her divine form. I gently held her hand and whispered, "Don't rush." Phoenix immediately grasped my hand in return, contemptuous as she sneered, "She's just a fool." Serpentia, watching our clasped hands, appeared flustered but quickly masked her emotions with indifference. "I will take responsibility for what I've done. But for you to die like this, it's far too easy," she continued, her tone unwavering. "The sects of the world hold Sage's Mountain as supreme. I want the so-called pearl of the sect, Lucas, to visit 81 sects, spreading the word far and wide. Let him proclaim how he schemed against his comrades, deceived the Phoenix, and brought calamity to the sect. He must make amends publicly. Finally, he will kneel and kowtow 1,000 times at the Cloud Summit Temple before ending his life at Sage's Mountain." Lucas's face grew paler with every word. In a desperate attempt to end it all, he tried to throw himself onto Zephyr's sword, but was immediately stopped. Serpentia's expression twisted with rage. "This is a divine decree. Dare you disobey?" Phoenix leaned close and explained in a soft voice. "A divine decree can only be made once in a goddess's lifetime, and those who hear it must obey. It's a pity to waste it on him." "Wait," I interjected. "I had intended for the living to peel the skin from both the dead and themselves to weave a mourning banner for my master. But now with Serpentia's decree, I'm not sure what to do." Serpentia quickly apologized. "I didn't realize you had other plans." I gently lifted Lucas's face, wiping away his tears. "No matter. He can peel his skin after the kowtowing." Lucas staggered down the mountain, his expression wooden. Before leaving, he looked back at Zephyr with despair in his eyes and said, "Master, wait for me. Wait for me to peel my skin for you." Zephyr sneered, his face pale and drained, his gaze unfocused. Standing atop the observation terrace, he cursed, "Villain! How dare you smear my name? I, a master of my time, for the world, for the people, have come to this because of you." Turning to the disciples below, Zephyr bellowed, "And you, as disciples of Sage's Mountain, why didn't you fight to the death to defend our gates?" Not a single person dared to step forward. By then, Lucas's steps were already faltering. He laughed maniacally as he descended the mountain, step by step. Zephyr turned to me, his voice trembling as he said, "It was I who brought you back from the obsidian platform, shielding you from the tribulation, aiding your cultivation." Before he could finish, Phoenix struck him with a fierce blow, leaving his face a mangled mess. She roared, "I investigated Adrian's divine root. It was destined for ascension. Yet you forcibly tore him from his rightful path and dragged him to this wretched place." I tossed both Zephyr and Harrison into the frost pool, saying to them, "There are 81 sects across the land, scattered to the ends of the earth. Lucas will traverse them all on foot. You two must be patient." Zephyr protested, "You lied to me. You said if I killed him I could live. I could have killed him." I raised my hand and crushed Zephyr's golden core into powder, scattering it into the frost pool. "Zephyr, oh Zephyr," I said coldly. "You taught me yourself, weakness is a sin. The weak can only writhe in the mire, blaming the world for oppressing them. You deceived me so many times. Consider this payback." I threw a dull blade to Harrison, who recoiled deeper into the cave. "Harrison, your master no longer has a golden core. Why don't you see if you can defeat him now?" The frost pool was enchanted. Entry was possible, but I had set it up casually as I ascended the mountain. The combination of spiritual power and talismans was reliable. I had tested the waters of the frost pool myself. The more you drank, the hungrier you became. Starvation would drive you to devour your own flesh. But fortunately for them, there were two of them. One might live a few months longer. Seated in the sect leader's chair, I looked down at the trembling disciples. Phoenix lazily stood by my side. "Hand over your golden cores one by one," I commanded. "Then walk down the mountain on foot. Don't let me see any of you in the cultivation world again. Outside the sect gates, enemies of Sage's Mountain await. Tread carefully. And beware of the vicious dogs near the frost pool." Once everything was settled, I sighed deeply. My divine sword seemed to resonate, its blade humming softly. Phoenix pouted and asked in a petulant tone, "What about me?" I smacked her with the sword scabbard. "We'll talk when we get to Cloud Summit Temple." Unable to contain her excitement, Phoenix transformed into her original form, carrying me back to Cloud Summit Temple. Serpentia silently followed us, kneeling at the temple gates upon arrival. Phoenix wouldn't let me pay her any attention, dragging me quickly into the temple. That night she nibbled lightly on my ear, her voice sultry as she whispered, "Master, don't think about her. Late affection is cheaper than grass." Half a month passed, and Serpentia remained kneeling outside the gates. Annoyed, Phoenix threw her a blade in a bowl. "If you seek absolution, give him your heart's blood." Lucas, meanwhile, trudged endlessly from one sect to another. Over and over he confessed his despicable deeds, repeating again and again that he was the sect's pearl. At first his voice was filled with bitterness and anger. Gradually it grew numb and monotonous. "I am the pearl of the sect, Master's beloved disciple. Master, wait for me. Wait for me to peel my skin for you."